Hi creators, welcome or welcome back to Academic Phoenix Plus. My name is Monica and I am your guide through your creative journey. In this video tutorial, we're going to cover how to complete Caitlyn's gun from the hit series Netflix, Arcane. Arcane Season 2 came out and I am super pumped and I got inspired, so therefore I am going to model, UV map, and texture Caitlyn's rifle. If you are new to this channel, I post tutorials on a weekly basis. Software includes Maya, ZBrush, Substance Painter, and so much more. So if that is your sort of thing, please consider subscribing. So bring out that creativity, open up that software, and let's go ahead and finish modeling Caitlyn's gun from the Netflix series Arcane. All right, let's go ahead and get started with the body of the rifle, which is known as the stock. I'm actually looking at an image right now, and according to this graphic, that the current part of the rifle that I'm working on is called the stock, S-T-O-C-K. So I learn something new every day, and I'm just using a basic cube. So just like anything else, I'm going to start off with moving those vertices, and make sure you click and drag so that you're grabbing the vertices in the back and also the front. And then I am going to extrude and make sure that my vertices are matching, and as well as add an edge so that I can go ahead and start manipulating it, because there is the back of the stock of the rifle and I want to make sure it matches. Now, it turns out that that metallic section that I'm currently working on right now is called the butt of the rifle. So I find that extremely humorous because I am 5, but yes, there it is, the stock and the butt. So then now I'm going to go ahead and extrude and again move those vertices around and kind of give you extra edges to make sure that it matches really well with the reference image. And you always want to add extra edges in case you need it. So you'll notice that I'm working on the perspective view to grab the necessary faces, and then I'm going to use the front view to be able to create the necessary details for the side. So I'm working on both perspectives. It's pretty important to do that. So now that I've accomplished this part, I'm going to continue expanding it forward because it looks like this whole thing is part of the rifle. So therefore I'm going to go ahead and continue it forward. It doesn't have any depth changes, like it doesn't get thicker or thinner. It's just nice and flat. So it's a great idea to just continue extruding until you get the rest of the body of the rifle. It's pretty fun when you look at it. Again, it seems really basic right now, but eventually I'm going to start giving it supporting edges such as beveling and making sure that everything looks really good and it matches the reference images. Similar to the previous tutorial, I'm going to be using the Create Edge Loop tool and going into the options to make sure I select 2 edges instead of creating just one. And then I'll be able to move those vertices, and I'm using the reference image to make sure that it matches how the edge is looking. And then, so I added 2 edges in the center, and then I'm going to grab the corner edges to create my own large bevel. Then I am going to add myself a couple of other edges to make sure I support those. Now, of course, you can always use bevel, but in this case, I'm just adding my own because it just seems a lot easier that way. I'd like to go into wireframe to make sure all the geometry is aligning correctly. And there we go. Pretty cool. Let's go ahead and start working on the back of the stock, also known as the butt of the rifle. And we're going to get that all nice and all the geometry nice and aligned to make sure it matches. And then after that, I'm going to extrude. I'm going to go ahead and scale it. When I UV map, it's probably going to be on its own because it's a different material. So now I'm going to bevel those edges because when I pressed the number 3, it did not look so good. So I want to make sure those edges look really nice when I press the number 3. And there you go. Beveling is definitely a really, really important part when you are working on a hard surface object. All right, next I am going to be centering that pivot and duplicating that piece of geometry because it's time to add some details. Select my duplicated one and create new edge. And the purpose for this is to go ahead and delete those unnecessary faces because I now have the pieces that I need to create that metallic space. Same thing for this. I don't need those faces, so I'm going to go ahead and delete them because I just need the top. Now that I have that, I can go ahead and delete any edges that really don't do it much. If it's a straight line, you might as well get rid of them. And then as always, go ahead and move those vertices to make sure that it matches your reference. By the way, if you guys want to download the reference, you can go to academicphoenixplus.com and download it for free. Again, this is not my references. I'm not claiming that this is mine. I'm just providing it for educational purposes. All right, extrude, and go ahead and expand it a little bit. And there you go. As always, I'm going to go ahead and bevel because I know if I press the number 3, it's going to collapse. And there we go. We now have this silver top of this rifle. Looks cool. Let's go ahead and keep moving forward, creating another cube. And I want to make sure in my perspective view that everything intersects correctly. And it's time to build. I'm not sure. I think it's called the magazine holder of a rifle. All the graphics are about the bolt handle, the stock, the trigger guard, things like that. I'm sure somebody out there in the internet knows exactly what this is, but basically I'm doing the same thing as I did before, which is grabbing a cube, extruding, moving those vertices, and then continuing on. Again, you just want to double check to make sure you're not accidentally grabbing extra faces. You always want to grab the one in front and then extrude. All right, got the base. Everything looks like it's matching. I made it a little thinner so that everything fits a little bit better. And now it's time to add those supporting edges. So once again, I'm going to insert an edge, and I'm going to use my reference to look at that beveled edge and also that indentation, because that's going to come in handy later. If I can use the geometry that I currently have, I might as well do that. I'm going to make sure I have everything selected. It'll be a lot easier if I just go ahead and bevel it. There we go. And that's looking really nice. And a supporting edge at the edge. Make sure it fits. Make sure, just moving things around, making sure everything fits. And everything looks good in number 3, which is smooth preview. I decided to select the model because the last thing I want to do is select random things like you see here. I'm deselecting. So make sure you always are checking to see if everything is in a good place. And then I'm going to extrude and scale. And you can see that I press the number 3 and I'm getting some interesting pulling. And I'm going to go ahead and add some supporting edges so that when I press the number 3, it's going to look really nice. Right? Select faces that you don't need and delete. I'm kind of nervous about UV mapping this, but it's going to be amazing when I start texturing it. All right, it's coming along. All right, here comes the trigger. Now this one I used a variety of techniques. I'm going to start with the very left side and then of course extrude. But then later on I start using a different method, which is extruding using a curve. And that one was surprisingly effective for the trigger because there's just a lot of geometry there. And it would take me a long time for me to like extrude and move and extrude. And I'm going to basically bevel these edges because this piece was actually pretty easy to make. Go ahead and bevel them and increase the segments, reduce diffraction until you get a nice piece. There it is. And deleting faces. And by the way, I usually clean up geometry when I'm UV mapping because then I'm UV mapping and I'm looking at the piece a little bit more clearly, and then I'm like, I don't need that there. So here I am about to create more of the trigger. And in this case, I'm going to do the same thing as what I did, which is going to be rotating it, scaling it, and getting the basic shape there to start off with. Now, as always, I can't go ahead and say extrude and then extrude again and keep extruding, but I found it easier if I just grab a curve and create the outline. As you can see here, I'm just creating a curve. And then I can select the face, shift select the curve, and then extrude, which is great. And then after that, I have geometry that I can play with, and I'll go ahead and use the geometry and move the vertices around, which made it super easy and super efficient and fast. So now I'm going to extrude just because a curve would not be able to do that for me. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I can extrude here, rotate it. This is kind of like the traditional way of doing it, which is okay for a small piece like this. And then I'm going to go ahead and set it up like this. And this was a pretty long piece. But again, I might as well use a curve. So I'm going to go ahead and, using the reference image, create a curve. And it's just going to be a lot easier for me to create these curves and extrude from a curve versus to extrude and shape and extrude and shape. So you want to select the face, shift select the curve, and then you extrude. Give yourself a couple of divisions, and there we go. Now you have a nice amount of geometry to play with. That one was pretty easy. Let's go for the other one. The other one, it's actually the bottom. So again, select that bottom face. Shift select, if it lets you. Shift select the curve, extrude, give yourself a few more divisions, and then model away. There we go. This one I'm just going to extrude myself. Just pull it out, scale it in, and way easy. Now I am going to bridge these, so I'm going to delete those interfaces and then use bridge. Like I said, I used multiple things here, and then it gives me the geometry that I need, and then I go ahead and grab some vertices and tweak them. So this one actually turned out to be surprisingly easy, and I enjoyed that one the most, I think, just because it was just like a bunch of different things that I used: curves, extruding, and then I bridged, and now I'm going to bevel. Again, select the edges that you want to support, and don't forget to select both sides. And I am making sure that I'm selecting the edges from the inside of the machine of the barrel because I don't want to miss anything. I'm kind of looking at the reference and trying to figure out, some areas are nice and soft and other areas are a little sharper. So I'm making sure that I'm selecting those edges. Control B, increase my segments, change the fraction, and just like that, I have the trigger. Make it a little thicker, and there we go. I am going to now do the actual trigger itself. So I was working on the trigger guard. Now it's the trigger itself. That one's the small lever that's going to get squeezed to start the firing process according to the definition here. And this one's easy because it's just a cube that I'm going to extrude and then bring in the vertices and then continue the same process as before. So you grab the face, you extrude. There you go. And you continue doing that. And then once you're done, you're going to select those edges that you want to make sure you support, which is almost all of them. Also add the vertices that you need to make sure it matches your reference. So you can see that I'm going to go ahead and select all the vertices. All the edges that I need. Don't forget the top. Control B. Increase the segments, and voila, we now have a trigger. Now I want to make sure things are aligned. So you're going to see me going into the top view, looking at wireframe and making sure everything is aligned and basically working together. Cool. All right, don't forget to center the pivot, delete the history, freeze the transformation, and of course, save iterations. So the next part is, that one kind of confused me. The concept art's a little bizarre, especially around the corner. It appears that this metal piece goes to the side of the rifle and then it goes around to the bottom, and I was very confused, but I decided to go ahead and build one side and then gonna mirror it to the other side. So this one was a little weird for me, but I'm gonna do the best I can. And same story, I decided to use the curve tool and basically build it first like this and then wrap it around my rifle later. The curve does get created in the center of the grid, so make sure that you move it to be right below the geometry, extrude, and now you have geometry to work with, as you can see here. So this part's not the bad, this is the cool part. This is the one that I was like, okay, so far so good. So in this case, I decided to go ahead and instead of trying to move every single edge on its own, I'm going to use what's called soft select. That is the letter B on your keyboard, and there is a little bit of a gradient. And what it does is that it's a gradient of selection. So instead of moving it precisely this particular place, you can use a gradient, which is a really nice way of modeling organically, but it also works for this particular piece. So I'm going to be grabbing specific vertices, and it's going to grab within a kind of like a gradient fashion. It's going to grab the other vertices around it, and therefore it's going to be a little bit easier to move these vertices around. So now that I have that, I'm going to continue working on it. In this case, I'm going to select those faces and extrude them to try to build that interesting piece that has like a little bit of a, I guess it's another part of the guard, the trigger guard. It's definitely a very interesting design. Then I'm going to extrude and bring those vertices in. Now you can see that it looks good the front view, but when you look at it in perspective view, it's not so pretty. So I'm going to try to go in and make things a little flatter so that I can make this look a little bit nicer. So I'm going to be moving some edges a little bit closer to each other so that the shape matches better of the rifle. And there it is. It's a little bit weird, but hopefully it still works. So what I'm going to do next is try to mirror it to the other side. Now that I've selected that, I'm going to isolate select, make sure that the object is centered, and then I'm going to mirror it based on object. Sometimes it's a little challenging to see where everything is, but you just have to kind of make sure that it's an object world, and you just have to figure out what the direction is. It always takes me a second to find it. Oh, found it. -Z. One day I'll figure it out. I'm sure there's a rationale behind it. And there you have it. So I'll notice that the edges are collapsing. So go ahead and add those necessary edges. Delete anything that you don't need. Make sure you don't delete something that you do need. And there we go. Again, it's a little odd piece, but it works. Add those supporting edges. I could have beveled it, but I decided to go ahead and do this. Cool. And now we have the rifle. Cool. It's coming along. Let's make sure everything's shaped correctly. Make sure everything's fitting correctly. And we now have Caitlyn's gun. There's still more details that need to be done. Now comes the gears, the little pieces. So let's go ahead and create a basic cylinder. Let's reduce the subdivision here. Remove the cap. It's going to be this guy right here. Now, I noticed that, this is later, of course, but I noticed that I thought this was just one long gear, but it turns out that it's actually kind of like a sight. So I'm going to probably fix that later. But right now, this is how I created the little gear. Just again, it's a very basic extrude, pull, extrude, scale, so on and so forth. And now I'm adding edges. I do have an end gun in the center, but I'm going to go ahead and delete this face, and then I'm going to mirror it to the other side. Again, I like to put my manipulator right where it's going to be mirrored. So instead of using world space, I'm going to be using object space. And now I got to figure out which direction it is. There it is. And now I have that detail. Now this is when I was like, oh, there's an end gun. I forgot about that. So I can delete it, or I can actually clean it up using the multi-cut tool. Now I have to do the same thing to the other side. And I decided, you know what? It's just easier for me to mirror it. It was so fast. So let me go ahead and mirror it. So again, choose world space, and there it is. Now the left side and the right side are the same. Okay, gonna duplicate it. There's another one. Basically the same thing on this side. So I'm gonna use the same one. And then I know there's another one, kind of small detail right here. I thought about texturing it, but then I decided that, you know, it's kind of sticking out. I'm just gonna go ahead and put it in there. Now I don't need all of it. So I'm going to delete those faces and then move it to the other side. And there we go. And the rest is going to be textured. Center the pivot, freeze the transformations, delete the history, group it, Control G, and now we have Caitlyn's gun. I'm cleaning up the outliner, But there you go. That's how we do it. Press the number 3 and everything looks really good. And it's ready for a render. All right, everybody. The rifle is now done. The model, very exciting. Now it's time to UV map it. And then, of course, that means that it's getting ready for the really exciting stuff, which is the texturing. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you learned a thing or two. If you did, please like and subscribe. That is your message to me, letting me know that you like this content and that you want to see more. Please share my videos. If you know an Arcane fan out there that would like to learn how to model Caitlyn's rifle, then please share my videos. That would be amazing, and it would also help the YouTube algorithm, which helps me out. Take a look at academicphoenixplus.com. There you will find free ebooks, 3D models, and so much more. So take a look at academicphoenixplus.com. Again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Keep creating, and I will see you next time as we UV map Caitlyn's rifle.